Good morning and welcome on this blessed Sunday, December 14, 2025. Today we gather with purpose, with hearts attuned to the possibility that this day is not ordinary, but full of potential for transformation. As we prepare to command our day with prayer, we acknowledge that prayer is not just a routine, it is a deliberate act of faith, a declaration of authority over every moment, challenge, and opportunity that lies ahead. Together, we will step into the practice of intentionally speaking life, favor, and breakthrough over our paths. Let us open our minds and hearts to the power within our prayers, knowing that the words we speak today have the power to shape the outcomes of our lives and those around us. Prayer is more than a habit, more than a routine act performed at set times during the day. It is a profound declaration, a verbal affirmation that carries immense power to shape not only our internal state, but the very circumstances that surround us. When we pray with intention, we are not merely speaking words into the air. We are entering into a divine conversation, aligning our hearts and minds with the purposes and promises of God. The act of prayer, particularly when it is purposeful and directed, sets the tone for the entirety of our day. It establishes a spiritual atmosphere in which every thought, every decision, and every action can be guided by divine wisdom. From the very first moment we lift our voices in prayer, we are making a statement about how we intend to engage with the world, and we are inviting God to enter fully into the unfolding of our day. There is an energy in prayer, an invisible current that moves through our spirit, influencing our emotions, our perceptions, and even our choices. It is this energy that transforms an ordinary morning into an ordinary beginning, allowing us to approach life's challenges not from a place of fear or uncertainty, but from a position of authority and confidence in God's presence. When we understand that prayer is a declaration, we recognize that every word we speak carries weight, that our declarations are not passive or empty, but active forces that shape reality. Each sentence we utter, each heartfelt petition functions as a blueprint for the day ahead, creating a framework within which our lives can operate in harmony with divine intention. To pray with purpose means to speak with clarity, to articulate our desires, our needs, and our gratitude in a way that is focused and deliberate. It is a conscious effort to engage with the unseen forces of the spiritual realm, to summon the presence and power of God into the mundane and the extraordinary moments of life. When we begin our day with prayer, we are making a conscious decision to invite God's oversight and guidance before we are swept up in the busyness or distractions that inevitably arise. This is not a passive act of saying a few words before rushing into daily responsibilities. It is a profound declaration that establishes spiritual primacy, signaling that our day will not unfold according to chance, but according to divine design. Prayer, therefore, functions as both a shield and a guiding light. It protects our minds from the anxiety and uncertainty that can cloud judgment and sap strength, while simultaneously illuminating the path forward, giving us clarity, focus, and direction. It is in this space of prayerful declaration that we find the alignment between our hearts and the purposes of God, where our desires are refined and elevated to resonate with divine will. Every individual who engages in such deliberate prayer is engaging in an act of spiritual leadership over their own life. We are declaring sovereignty over our thoughts, our emotions, our decisions, and our interactions. By speaking intentionally, we set a tone that others around us can sense, whether consciously or unconsciously, and we influence the environment in which we operate. This is why prayer cannot be treated lightly. It is a form of authority, a way to actively shape not only our experiences, but the experiences of those we encounter throughout the day. When we speak words of prayer over our day, we are activating a spiritual principle that has been in effect since the beginning of time, that life responds to the authority of the spoken word. Every declaration of hope, every petition for guidance, every expression of gratitude carries a vibration that interacts with the unseen forces of the universe. These vibrations align circumstances, attract opportunities, and create pathways where none seem possible. Prayer is, in essence, a tool of transformation. It transforms our hearts, our minds, and the world around us by bringing divine perspective into every situation. It enables us to move from a mindset of reaction to a mindset of intentionality, where we operate not merely based on external conditions, but based on spiritual insight and assurance. When we take the time to command our day with prayer, we are engaging in a spiritual practice that disciplines our minds to focus on what is true, noble, and aligned with God's purpose. We are deliberately rejecting the distractions, the doubts, and the negativity that can otherwise dominate our thoughts and influence our actions. Prayer trains us to see beyond the immediate circumstances, to understand the bigger picture, and to respond from a place of faith rather than fear. It is a declaration of trust in the unseen, a commitment to align our lives with principles that transcend the limitations of the natural world. This form of prayer is intentional and deliberate. It is not reactive or habitual, it is proactive. It requires that we pause, reflect, and articulate our desires and intentions in alignment with divine truth. Each morning, when we choose to pray in this way, we set the agenda for our day, establishing priorities that are rooted in wisdom and insight rather than confusion or impulse. The words we speak become more than expressions of desire. They are instruments that shape reality, aligning our personal energy and focus with the greater spiritual currents at work in our lives. Consider the way prayer functions as a declaration in a practical sense. By speaking life over our day, we are mentally and spiritually preparing ourselves to face challenges with resilience. We are framing our experiences with expectation, knowing that God is present, that his guidance is available, and that his power is at work in every situation we encounter. This mindset allows us to approach our day with confidence, courage, and a sense of purpose, rather than uncertainty or fear. In doing so, we are not only influencing our own experience, but also impacting the people around us. Our words, our attitude, and our spiritual alignment radiate outward, affecting the environments we enter and the interactions we have. Prayer, therefore, is a form of leadership. It is the act of taking command of our day before the circumstances of the day take command of us. It is a declaration that we will not be passive participants in the unfolding of events, but active co-creators with God in shaping the outcomes of our lives. This perspective shifts the way we approach every aspect of life. It encourages mindfulness, intention, and a deep awareness that our words and actions carry weight. The prayerful declaration becomes a framework for our choices, influencing how we respond to difficulties, opportunities, and relationships. It is a spiritual lens through which we view the world, allowing us to see potential, possibility, and purpose where others may only see obstacles or uncertainty. Prayer also has the power to release us from the limitations of doubt, worry, and fear when we articulate our intentions and our trust in God's guidance. We are consciously choosing to step out of the reactive mindset that can dominate our mornings. We are asserting our spiritual authority and acknowledging that our lives are not subject solely to the circumstances we encounter, but are shaped by a higher power that works in alignment with our faith and declarations. The discipline of daily prayer reinforces this truth, creating a rhythm of intentionality and spiritual alignment. Each morning becomes a sacred moment in which we set the tone, speak life, and declare purpose. This consistent practice cultivates an awareness of divine presence and a deeper understanding of our role in co-creating our reality with God. The declaration of our prayers shapes not only our perspective, but our inner character. It strengthens patience, cultivates gratitude, and fosters resilience. When we command our day with prayer, we are consciously choosing to anchor our hearts and minds in principles that elevate rather than diminish, that inspire rather than discourage. This anchoring effect influences how we navigate relationships, approach work, respond to challenges, and pursue opportunities. Prayer is therefore a transformative practice that touches every facet of our lives. It is the starting point from which all other actions flow. By taking intentional time to declare the nature and direction of our day, we establish a foundation of spiritual authority, clarity, and purpose that can guide us through complexity and uncertainty. We acknowledge that we are not powerless or passive. Instead, we are active participants in shaping the day, influencing outcomes, and inviting divine intervention. Every word spoken in prayer carries a potential energy, a spiritual imprint that resonates throughout our day. When we command our day with prayer, we are aligning our will with divine will, our actions with higher purpose, and our hearts with spiritual truth. This alignment sets a tone of expectation, openness, and readiness for the blessings, insights, and opportunities that await. In this way, prayer functions as a powerful declaration that shapes not only the events of the day, but also our perception, our mindset, and our emotional resilience. It is an intentional act that sets the stage for success, peace, and purpose. Each morning, as we rise and lift our hearts and voices in prayer, we are making a profound statement of intent. We are declaring that the day ahead will be met with faith, clarity, and authority. We are setting the spiritual atmosphere, framing our expectations, and inviting God's presence to direct, protect, and empower us in every moment. The declaration of prayer, therefore, is both an act of faith and a practical tool of influence. It empowers us to navigate life with intentionality, to respond to challenges with wisdom, and to embrace opportunities with courage. In doing so, we create a life guided by purpose, shaped by divine alignment, and energized by the transformative power of prayer. Prayer as a declaration is not a passive activity, but an active engagement with God's power. It is a deliberate choice to shape the day, to speak into existence the outcomes we desire, and to invite divine guidance at every turn. This practice cultivates a mindset of authority, expectation, and intentionality that influences every decision, every interaction, and every experience. Through consistent prayer, we develop a heightened awareness of God's presence and a deeper understanding of our role as co-creators in the unfolding of our lives. It is this intentional, focused, and deliberate prayer that transforms ordinary mornings into extraordinary beginnings, allowing us to command our day with confidence, clarity, and unwavering faith. Speaking life over circumstances is one of the most powerful spiritual practices we can engage in because it transforms our perspective, our environment, and our experience of reality. When we consciously choose to declare life, hope, and favor over our circumstances, we are making a deliberate statement of faith that transcends what we see or feel. Life does not always unfold according to our timing or understanding, yet the act of speaking positive, faithful words aligns our spirit with divine principles that influence both the seen and unseen realms. Every word we speak carries energy and intent. When we choose words that affirm possibility, favor, and breakthrough, we are not merely expressing optimism, we are actively shaping the reality around us by inviting divine intervention into our situations. The concept of speaking life is rooted in the understanding that words are creative. They have the power to mold perception, alter the atmosphere, and release potential that may otherwise remain dormant. To speak life is to engage in a spiritual discipline that elevates our focus above fear, doubt, or limitation, and centers it on truth, purpose, and promise. It is a practice of intentionally choosing faith over fear, hope over despair, and trust over worry. When we declare life over our circumstances, we acknowledge that the natural situation may not be fully within our control, But we recognize that through prayer, alignment with God, and the spoken word, we can influence outcome in ways that are powerful and transformative. This practice requires a level of awareness and intentionality that goes beyond rote phrases or habitual expressions. It is not enough to simply say the words. We must engage our hearts, our understanding, and our belief in what we are declaring. Every declaration of life, every spiritual affirmation of hope or victory is a spiritual seed planted in the soil of our day. These seeds take root in the unseen, growing in strength and power as we consistently speak faith, gratitude, and expectation over the areas of life that matter most. The atmosphere in which we operate is influenced by our words. Speaking life changes our emotional and mental state, allowing clarity, courage, and wisdom to emerge even in the midst of challenges. When we proclaim favor, breakthrough, and victory, we shift the energy around us, creating a space in which solutions, opportunities, and divine connections can manifest. This is not merely an abstract concept. It is a practical and observable principle. Individuals who consistently speak life over their circumstances often experience shifts in their relationships, careers, health, and personal growth. Their words create a momentum that carries through their actions, decisions, and interactions, opening doors that may have otherwise remained closed. Speaking life over circumstances also requires faith in the unseen. It is an acknowledgement that even when the situation seems dire or the outcome uncertain, the power of God and the authority of the spoken word can create change. This faith is not passive, it is active, requiring us to consciously reject negativity, doubt, and discouragement while embracing declarations of hope, provision, and divine guidance. It is an intentional stance, a deliberate choice to shape our reality rather than allowing circumstances to define us. One of the most profound aspects of speaking life is the transformation it brings to our inner being. As we consistently declare hope, victory, and favor over our circumstances, we cultivate resilience, patience, and perseverance. Our minds are trained to focus on solutions rather than problems, and our spirits are fortified against despair. This internal transformation is essential because the way we perceive and respond to life directly impacts the results we experience. Words are not only creative in the spiritual sense, but also in the psychological and emotional sense. Speaking life reshapes our beliefs and expectations, aligning them with possibilities that may have seemed unreachable before. When we declare victory over challenges, health over illness, peace over chaos, or favor over difficulty, we are reinforcing a mindset that expects goodness, recognizes divine provision, and trusts in outcomes that align with higher purpose. This mindset is contagious. Those who consistently speak life over their circumstances influence the people around them. Their declarations radiate confidence, hope, and empowerment, inspiring others to embrace faith and possibility. By speaking life, we not only impact our own journey, but also become conduits of encouragement and transformation for those we encounter, creating a ripple effect of positivity, hope, and divine alignment. Speaking life is not limited to positive experiences or successes. It is most powerful in the midst of difficulty, uncertainty, and challenge. When we face trials, our natural inclination may be to focus on the problem, to worry, or to succumb to fear. However, choosing to speak life in these moments demonstrates spiritual maturity and authority. It is an act of declaring that our faith and trust in God are stronger than the obstacles before us, that the circumstances do not dictate our destiny, and that divine favor and provision are available even in the most challenging situations. In practice, speaking life over circumstances requires clarity of thought and intention. It is essential to identify the areas of life that require declaration, whether they relate to health, relationships, finances, career, or personal growth. By intentionally articulating specific outcomes, we create a framework for our prayers, affirmations, and declarations to operate with precision and purpose. This intentionality strengthens the impact of our words, making them more powerful and aligned with divine intention. The discipline of speaking life also fosters an awareness of God's presence and activity. As we declare hope, provision, and victory, we recognize that we are co-laborers with the divine, partners in bringing spiritual principles into tangible manifestation. This partnership requires attentiveness, patience, and a willingness to act in alignment with the words we speak, trusting that the unseen is working even when visible results are not immediately apparent. Over time, speaking life becomes a lifestyle, a natural and instinctive response to every situation. We begin to internalize the principles of faith, hope, and expectation, allowing them to guide our decisions, shape our perspective, and influence our interaction. Life becomes a series of conscious declarations, each word spoken with intention and authority, shaping the trajectory of our experiences and reinforcing our alignment with divine purpose. When we speak life over circumstances, we also develop resilience against negativity, criticism, and external pressures. The words we declare serve as anchors, grounding us in truth and reinforcing our understanding that we are not bound by the limitations of the world, but empowered by the principles of faith, favor, and divine alignment. This spiritual foundation provides stability, confidence, and courage, enabling us to navigate complexity with grace and wisdom. Speaking life is a transformative practice that touches every area of our existence. It is a tool for personal growth, spiritual development, and empowerment. Each declaration strengthens our faith, aligns our actions with divine guidance, and cultivates an awareness of possibilities beyond our immediate perception. Through this practice, we learn to trust in the unseen, rely on divine timing, and embrace the power of intentional words as instruments of change. The habit of speaking life also cultivates gratitude, hope, and expectation. By articulating positive outcomes and affirming divine favor, we shift our focus from scarcity to abundance, from limitation to opportunity, and from despair to hope. This shift in focus has a profound impact on our emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being, allowing us to approach each day with clarity, energy, and purpose. Furthermore, speaking life over circumstances is a declaration of authority. It is an assertion that we have the power through partnership with the divine to influence our environment and shape our experiences. This authority is exercised not through force or coercion, but through faith alignment and intentional action. Every word spoken in faith becomes a tool of empowerment, guiding outcomes, creating opportunity, and establishing a spiritual atmosphere conducive to growth, favor, and success. The practice of speaking life is deeply relational as well. It affects how we interact with others, how we perceive challenges, and how we respond to opportunities. Our words become a reflection of our mindset, values, and spiritual alignment. When we consistently choose to speak life, we cultivate a presence that radiates confidence, hope, and divine assurance. Others are drawn to this energy, and the environments we enter are shaped by the positivity, expectation, and authority inherent in our declarations. In the end, speaking life over circumstances is a comprehensive practice that encompasses faith, intentionality, authority, and spiritual alignment. It is a conscious choice to focus on possibility rather than limitation, to trust in divine guidance rather than fear, and to declare outcomes aligned with higher purpose rather than reacting to immediate conditions. It transforms our mindset, our environment, and our interactions, creating a foundation for consistent growth, empowerment, and divine favor. This practice requires diligence, focus, and a deep understanding of the power inherent in our words. It is a discipline that grows stronger over time, reinforcing our spiritual authority and cultivating a lifestyle of expectation, faith, and purpose. As we engage in the act of speaking life, we participate in a dynamic process that bridges the unseen and the visible, aligning our hearts, minds, and actions with divine principles. Through deliberate, consistent declarations, we shape our reality, influence outcomes, and cultivate an atmosphere where hope, favor, and possibility flourish. Every spoken word of life is a declaration of authority, a step toward divine alignment, and an invitation for the presence and power of God to manifest in tangible ways throughout our circumstances. The transformation that occurs through this practice is not merely temporary, it is cumulative, building over time to establish a foundation of faith, resilience, and spiritual empowerment that influences every aspect of our existence. By speaking life, we are not only changing our present circumstances, but also shaping the trajectory of our future, cultivating a life rooted in purpose, faith, and divine favor, and creating an enduring legacy of hope, influence, and spiritual authority. Intentional prayer shapes outcomes and influences our environment in ways that are often unseen, yet profoundly powerful. When we pray with focus and purpose, we are actively participating in the process of creation and transformation. Prayer is not merely a passive request for divine intervention. It is a deliberate act that positions us to co-labor with God in shaping the circumstances, experiences, and relationships that define our lives. Every intentional prayer carries authority, purpose, and the capacity to shift both the spiritual and natural realms. To pray intentionally is to recognize that our words, thoughts, and declarations are instruments of influence. It requires clarity of vision, a deep understanding of our needs and desires, and a conscious alignment with God's will. When we engage in intentional prayer, we are choosing to direct our energy and focus toward outcomes that align with divine purpose, rather than being swept along by circumstance, fear, or uncertainty. This approach to prayer demands mindfulness and discipline. It requires us to pause, reflect, and articulate our petitions, declarations, and affirmations with deliberate attention. Each word spoken becomes a declaration of faith, a spiritual seed planted in the soil of possibility, waiting for the conditions to align for its manifestation. Through this process, we establish a rhythm of engagement with God that strengthens our awareness of His presence, deepens our understanding of His guidance, and cultivates a posture of expectancy. When we pray intentionally, we are also shaping the environment around us. The energy we release through prayer interacts with our thoughts, our emotions, and the people and circumstances we encounter. Intentional prayer has the power to diffuse tension, create clarity, and open doors that may have seemed closed. It is a tool for both personal transformation and relational influence, allowing us to affect not only our own lives, but also the lives of those around us in ways that honor divine purpose. The act of shaping outcomes through prayer requires persistence and faith. It is not a single utterance or a hurried request, but a consistent, disciplined practice of engaging with God, aligning our will with His, and speaking truth over our circumstances. Each prayer, whether spoken in gratitude, supplication, or declaration, contributes to the formation of an atmosphere where divine influence can operate freely. Intentional prayer also cultivates discernment and spiritual awareness. As we speak and align ourselves with God's will, we become more attuned to His direction, more sensitive to the opportunities He places before us, and more confident in navigating challenges. This heightened awareness allows us to respond with wisdom rather than react impulsively, and to make decisions that reflect purpose, alignment, and clarity. Furthermore, intentional prayer builds resilience by declaring faith, hope, and alignment with divine will. We create a framework within which we can navigate difficulty without succumbing to despair or discouragement. Our prayers establish a spiritual authority that anchors our thoughts and emotions, providing stability and perspective, even in times of uncertainty or challenge. Through consistent, purposeful prayer, we also develop a mindset of expectancy. We begin to anticipate God's provision, guidance, and intervention. This expectancy is not rooted in wishful thinking, but in a deep understanding of His faithfulness and the authority inherent in our declarations. The act of speaking intentionally over our day and circumstances fosters confidence, courage, and clarity, allowing us to engage fully with life while trusting that God is orchestrating the outcomes in alignment with His perfect plan. Intentional prayer is both proactive and transformative. It is proactive in that it allows us to take authority over our day, our decisions, and our interactions, rather than passively reacting to events as they occur. It is transformative because it reshapes our perception, our environment, and even the trajectory of our experiences. As we pray with clarity and purpose, we begin to witness shifts that reflect the alignment of our intentions with divine will. Every circumstance, relationship, and challenge is filtered through the lens of intentional prayer. And this perspective allows us to see opportunities where others might see obstacles, solutions where others might see dead ends, and potential where others might see limitation. The process of intentional prayer also reinforces the principle of co-creation with God. It reminds us that our words and alignment matter, that we are active participants in the unfolding of our lives, and that we can partner with divine wisdom to navigate complexity and manifest outcomes that honor purpose and faith. Through this practice, we cultivate patience, perseverance, and a deepened sense of trust in the unseen workings of God's hand. One of the most profound effects of intentional prayer is its capacity to influence not only our personal circumstances, but also the broader environment in which we operate. The energy released through focused, purposeful prayer creates a spiritual atmosphere that encourages clarity, peace, and receptivity. Those around us are impacted by the calm, assurance, and authority that emanates from a life grounded in intentional prayer. Relationships are strengthened, conflicts are diffused, and collaborative efforts become more harmonious when our prayers shape the space we occupy. Intentional prayer also serves as a tool of alignment by consciously declaring outcomes, expressing gratitude, and affirming faith in God's guidance. We are aligning our thoughts, actions, and emotions with principles that facilitate breakthrough, provision, and protection. This alignment is essential for navigating the unpredictability of life, providing a foundation upon which we can build confidence, resilience, and spiritual authority. In addition, intentional prayer encourages continuous reflection and self-awareness. It prompts us to evaluate our priorities, assess our intentions, and consider how our words and actions impact the outcomes we desire. By integrating prayer into our daily rhythm, we create a cycle of accountability, discernment, and focus that strengthens our ability to respond wisely to both opportunities and challenges. The practice of intentional prayer also teaches us the value of persistence and consistency. Breakthrough often requires time, faith, and repeated declarations. By committing to regular, purposeful prayer, we cultivate patience and endurance, recognizing that spiritual alignment and transformative outcomes may unfold gradually, yet surely. This discipline reinforces our faith, deepens our relationship with God, and cultivates a mindset of expectation that is grounded in trust rather than anxiety. Furthermore, intentional prayer fosters creativity, insight, and strategic thinking. As we engage in focused dialogue with God, we open ourselves to divine inspiration and guidance that may not be immediately apparent through natural reasoning alone. Solutions emerge, perspectives shift, and new possibilities are revealed, enabling us to navigate life with wisdom and clarity. Intentional prayer also emphasizes the importance of language and declaration. Words are not merely symbols, they carry spiritual weight and influence the direction of our thoughts, emotions, and circumstances. By choosing words that reflect hope, authority, faith, and gratitude, we are shaping our reality and setting the tone for outcomes that reflect divine alignment. The practice of shaping outcomes through intentional prayer is therefore both a spiritual and practical discipline. It empowers us to take authority over our lives, to cultivate resilience and clarity, and to create an environment conducive to growth, favor, and transformation. Each prayer, each declaration, and each intentional word contributes to a broader pattern of alignment with divine purpose, reinforcing our connection to God and our ability to navigate life with wisdom, confidence, and peace. Moreover, intentional prayer strengthens our capacity to respond to life with grace and discernment. It allows us to approach challenges with a clear mind, a focused heart, and a spirit attuned to divine guidance. We are better equipped to make decisions that honor our values, principles, and purpose, knowing that our prayers have created a framework for favorable outcomes and divine intervention. The act of intentional prayer also instills a sense of empowerment and accountability. It reminds us that we are not passive recipients of circumstance, but active participants in shaping our lives. By consistently engaging in prayer with purpose, we develop the awareness, discipline, and authority necessary to navigate complexity, influence outcomes, and create an atmosphere of favor, peace, and clarity. Intentional prayer, therefore, is not a ritualistic exercise, but a transformative practice that integrates faith, purpose, and spiritual authority into every aspect of life. It is a declaration of trust, a strategic engagement with the divine, and a means of shaping outcomes in alignment with God's will. By embracing this discipline, we cultivate resilience, clarity, discernment, and expectation, equipping ourselves to navigate life's challenges, seize opportunities, and influence our environment positively. Each intentional prayer strengthens our connection to God, reinforces our authority, and creates a foundation for sustained growth, favor, and divine alignment. Through the consistent practice of intentional prayer, we learn to operate with focus, clarity, and faith, ensuring that our lives, our actions, and our words are aligned with purpose, influence, and the transformative power of God's guidance. Every moment of intentional prayer becomes a step towards shaping our destiny, influencing our environment, and cultivating a life marked by divine favor, clarity, and empowerment. Through this practice, we come to understand the profound truth that prayer is not merely reactive, but proactive. Not simply a request, but a declaration, and not a passive act, but a powerful instrument for shaping outcomes, influencing circumstances, and aligning our lives with divine purpose. Cultivating a mindset of expectancy to receive God's provision and direction is one of the most transformative spiritual disciplines we can develop. Expectancy is not merely hoping or wishing for favorable outcomes. It is an intentional posture of the heart and mind that anticipates God's activity and provision in every situation. When we approach life with expectancy, we are signaling faith, trust, and confidence that God is actively working on our behalf. This mindset shapes the way we perceive our circumstances, the decisions we make, and the way we interact with the world around us. It is a conscious choice to believe that what God has promised will manifest, even when the natural evidence might suggest otherwise. Expectancy shifts our focus from limitations to possibilities, from lack to abundance, and from doubt to confidence. It aligns our spirit with divine timing and allows us to recognize opportunities, solutions, and guidance that might otherwise be blinders, turn off true life, and lose all hope of it, be overlooked. To cultivate expectancy, we must first understand that God's provision and direction are not dependent on our effort alone, but on His faithfulness and sovereignty. While our actions, prayers, and obedience are essential, it is the confident anticipation of God's response that activates spiritual momentum in our lives. Expectancy is an acknowledgement that God is aware of our needs, that His timing is perfect, and that his guidance is trustworthy. This mindset encourages vigilance and attentiveness. When we expect God to provide and direct, we become more sensitive to his leading, more observant of divine opportunities, and more receptive to his instructions. We are no longer passive participants in life waiting for things to happen, but active partners with God, co-laboring with him as we anticipate his intervention and provision. Cultivating expectancy requires discipline and consistency. It is nurtured through daily practices such as prayer, meditation on God's word, and reflection on his past faithfulness. By recalling previous instances where God has provided guidance, favor, or breakthroughs, we reinforce our confidence that he will continue to act in our lives. This reflection strengthens our faith and deepens our sense of trust, creating a fertile ground for expectancy to flourish. Expectancy also transforms our emotional and mental state. When we anticipate God's provision and direction, anxiety, fear, and worry diminish because we are anchoring our thoughts in the assurance of divine care. Instead of being consumed by uncertainty or doubt, we operate from a place of calm, assurance, and readiness to act when God's guidance becomes evident. It is a mindset that empowers us to navigate challenges with poise and to respond to opportunities with clarity. Developing a mindset of expectancy also influences the words we speak. The declarations we make, whether over ourselves, our families, or our circumstances, reflect the confidence we have in God's provision. Words spoken in faith reinforce our expectancy, aligning our heart and mind with the outcomes we believe God is orchestrating. Each declaration becomes a spiritual signal, releasing energy that aligns circumstances with divine purpose. Expectancy, when cultivated intentionally, also fosters resilience. Life is filled with seasons of waiting, uncertainty, and challenge. A mindset of expectancy allows us to endure these seasons with patience and confidence, knowing that God is working even when results are not immediately visible. This perspective prevents discouragement, strengthens perseverance, and sustains hope, enabling us to maintain focus on the promises of God rather than the temporary difficulties we face. Furthermore, expectancy nurtures a proactive and responsive attitude. It compels us to take actions that are aligned with God's guidance, to make decisions that reflect readiness to receive his provision, and to seize opportunities that present themselves in alignment with his timing. This dynamic interplay between anticipation and action creates a rhythm in our lives where faith, obedience, and divine response converge, producing tangible outcomes that reflect God's wisdom and care. Cultivating expectancy also deepens our relationship with God. It requires intimacy, attentiveness, and trust. By anticipating his provision and direction, we engage in a continual dialogue with him, listening for his voice, seeking his guidance, and responding in faith. This ongoing connection strengthens our spiritual sensitivity, enriches our understanding of his character, and heightens our ability to discern his will in complex situations. Expectancy influences our perception of challenges. When we approach difficulties with the expectation that God will provide solutions and direct our steps, we shift from a mindset of limitation to one of opportunity. Obstacles become lessons. Delays become preparation periods, and setbacks become catalysts for growth. This perspective empowers us to respond creatively, strategically, and faithfully, trusting that every situation is under God's sovereign control and that his direction is perfect. Developing a mindset of expectancy also impacts our interactions with others. When we operate from a place of confidence in God's provision and guidance, we radiate assurance, encouragement, and hope. Those around us are drawn to our faith, inspired by our trust, and motivated by the clarity and peace we exhibit. Expectancy, therefore, not only transforms our personal experience, but also creates a positive influence on our environment, relationships, and community. Cultivating expectancy requires intentional focus on God's promises. Scripture is a powerful tool in this process, offering examples of divine faithfulness, guidance, and provision. By meditating on these promises, internalizing them, and recalling them in prayer and declaration, we reinforce our confidence that God is active in our lives. Each reflection, each affirmation, each prayer strengthens the anticipation that His provision and direction will manifest. Expectancy also cultivates gratitude. When we anticipate God's provision, we are inclined to recognize and celebrate His hand in every small blessing, every insight, and every answered prayer. Gratitude reinforces our faith, strengthens our spiritual alignment, and prepares our hearts to receive even more of God's guidance and favor. It is an acknowledgement that God is not only capable, but also willing to act on our behalf. And it positions us to participate fully in the unfolding of His plans. Moreover, expectancy shapes our decision-making process. When we anticipate God's guidance, we approach choices with prayerful consideration, seeking His wisdom before acting. This alignment ensures that our decisions are more likely to produce results that honor God's will and reflect His purposes in our lives. Anticipation transforms indecision into clarity, uncertainty into confidence, and hesitation into decisive action. Cultivating expectancy also requires persistence in faith. There may be times when answers seem delayed or directions unclear, yet the mindset of expectancy sustains our confidence that God is working behind the scenes. It trains us to remain steadfast, patient, and vigilant, recognizing that His timing is perfect and that His provision will arrive at the right moment. This persistence reinforces spiritual maturity, strengthens character, and deepens trust in God's faithfulness. Expectancy is an active posture. It is not passive waiting, but a dynamic engagement with God's presence, promises, and guidance. It involves praying, listening, observing, and responding in an alignment with divine direction. Each action taken in faith, each prayer uttered with confidence, and each decision made with anticipation reinforces the expectation that God's provision and direction are already at work in our lives. Developing a mindset of expectancy also cultivates joy and peace. Anticipating God's involvement in our lives releases anxiety, replaces fear with confidence, and encourages a perspective of hopefulness. We experience a sense of calm assurance, knowing that our steps are guided, our needs are met, and our journey is under divine supervision. This peace sustains us through trials and enriches our daily experience. Furthermore, expectancy strengthens spiritual authority. As we confidently anticipate God's guidance and provision, we operate from a position of faith and authority, speaking life over our circumstances, making decisions in alignment with His will, and demonstrating trust that influences others positively. This authority is grounded not in self-reliance, but in a deep, abiding confidence in God's presence and power. Cultivating expectancy also encourages active participation in God's plan. By expecting His provision and direction, we are more likely to recognize opportunities to serve, to step into roles of influence, and to act upon insights that align with His purposes. This proactive engagement ensures that our lives are not only receptive to divine guidance, but also instrumental in bringing His plans to fruition. In essence, expectancy is a spiritual posture that integrates faith, trust, attentiveness, and proactive engagement. It transforms how we perceive our circumstances, how we respond to challenges, and how we interact with others. It aligns our heart and mind with God's promises, deepens our relationship with Him, and prepares us to receive His provision and direction with confidence, clarity, and gratitude. By cultivating this mindset intentionally, we position ourselves to experience a life marked by divine guidance, abundant provision, and a profound sense of purpose. Expectancy is both a discipline and a declaration. It requires conscious effort, daily practice, and continual reinforcement through prayer, reflection, and the study of God's Word. Each act of faith, each declaration of anticipation, and each prayer of alignment contributes to a strengthened posture of expectancy, creating a life characterized by readiness, assurance, and spiritual clarity. This mindset transforms ordinary experiences into extraordinary opportunities, obstacles into stepping stones, and uncertainty into faith-driven action. Through expectancy, we learn to navigate life with discernment, patience, and hope, trusting that God's provision is always timely and His direction always perfect. It empowers us to move confidently through each day, recognizing that we are not alone, that divine guidance is available, and that His provision is sufficient for every need, challenge, and opportunity we encounter. The cultivation of expectancy ultimately reshapes our internal landscape, influencing our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors in ways that align with God's principles. It establishes a foundation for spiritual resilience, emotional stability, and purposeful action. By developing and nurturing this mindset, we ensure that every decision, every action, and every interaction is informed by the expectation of God's active involvement, positioning us to live a life of favor, clarity, and divine alignment. Faithful declarations invite God's guidance, protection, and provision by creating a spiritual atmosphere in which divine influence can operate freely. When we make declarations rooted in faith, we are not merely repeating words, we are aligning our hearts, minds, and actions with God's principles, acknowledging His sovereignty and inviting His active participation in every area of our lives. Declarations made with confidence and belief act as spiritual catalysts, establishing a framework for outcomes that reflect divine wisdom and favor. These declarations signal intention, expectation, and authority, and they communicate a trust in God's presence and power that transforms both our inner being and our external circumstances. Faith-filled declarations are intentional acts of authority. They recognize that the spoken word carries spiritual weight and that when spoken in alignment with God's will, these words have the power to influence situations, relationships, and events. By declaring God's guidance, protection, and provision over our lives, we are actively exercising the authority granted to us through our relationship with Him. This authority is not based on our own power, but on our connection to the divine, our understanding of His promises, and our willingness to act in faith. When we speak with faith, we acknowledge that God is aware of our circumstances, that He is able to intervene, and that His timing and methods are perfect. This mindset transforms how we perceive challenges, respond to difficulties, and navigate uncertainty. Instead of reacting with fear, doubt, or anxiety, we respond with confidence, clarity, and hope, knowing that God's presence and power are actively working in our lives. Declarations rooted in faith also cultivate spiritual alignment. By consistently speaking words that reflect trust in God's guidance, protection, and provision, we train our hearts and minds to focus on His promises, rather than on limitations or obstacles. This alignment strengthens our spiritual sensitivity, heightens our discernment, and enables us to recognize opportunities, insights, and solutions that might otherwise go unnoticed. The act of making faithful declarations is both proactive and transformative. It is proactive because it allows us to take ownership of our spiritual authority, to set the tone for our day, and to create a mindset of expectancy. It is transformative because it changes our inner state, reshapes our perceptions, and influences the environment around us. Words spoken in faith carry energy and intentionality that interact with both the spiritual and natural realms, producing outcomes that reflect divine favor and wisdom. Consistency in making faithful declarations is essential. Repeatedly speaking words of guidance, protection, and provision reinforces our confidence in God's faithfulness, strengthens our spiritual authority, and deepens our relationship with Him. This consistent practice creates a rhythm of expectation and alignment, allowing us to operate with clarity and purpose, even in challenging circumstances. Faith-filled declarations also encourage resilience. Life is filled with uncertainties, trials, and moments of doubt. By speaking words rooted in trust and expectation, we cultivate a mindset that sustains hope, reinforces patience, and strengthens perseverance. Declarations serve as spiritual anchors, reminding us of God's sovereignty, his care, and his power, even when external circumstances appear difficult or confusing. Making faith-filled declarations also shapes our interactions with others. The confidence, assurance, and peace that emanate from a life grounded in these declarations influence our relationships, inspire those around us, and create environments in which cooperation, understanding, and encouragement flourish. Our words become instruments not only for personal alignment, but also for extending God's influence into our communities and spheres of interaction. Furthermore, faithful declarations reinforce the principle of co-laboring with God. When we declare his guidance, protection, and provision, we are partnering with him to bring his plans into manifestation. These declarations are expressions of trust and cooperation, acknowledging that while we act in faith and take steps aligned with his will, it is ultimately his power and wisdom that determine the outcomes. The process of making declarations rooted in faith requires attentiveness, intentionality, and understanding. It is essential to be specific and deliberate in our words, articulating our needs, desires, and expectations in alignment with God's principles. By clearly expressing our reliance on his guidance, protection, and provision, we strengthen the authority of our declarations and increase their capacity to influence circumstances and outcomes. Faithful declarations also foster gratitude. By acknowledging God's past faithfulness and expressing trust in his ongoing provision, we cultivate a mindset that appreciates his involvement in every aspect of our lives. Gratitude reinforces our expectancy, heightens our awareness of divine favor, and opens our hearts to receive even more of his guidance, protection, and provision. These declarations create a spiritual rhythm in our lives. Each morning, each moment of decision, and each challenge becomes an opportunity to speak with faith, to declare God's principles over our circumstances, and to align our hearts and minds with his will. Over time, this consistent practice establishes a foundation of spiritual authority, clarity, and alignment that permeates every area of life. Making faithful declarations also strengthens our perception of God's presence and timing. By speaking with expectation and trust, we heighten our awareness of his interventions, recognize his guidance, and learn to discern his voice amidst the noise of daily life. This sensitivity enables us to act with confidence, respond with wisdom, and embrace opportunities that reflect his purpose and timing. The practice of faithful declarations further empowers us to overcome fear, doubt, and uncertainty. Life is unpredictable, and challenges often arise without warning. By consistently declaring God's guidance, protection, and provision, we anchor our hearts in trust, strengthen our resolve, and establish a perspective that views obstacles as temporary and surmountable within the context of divine authority. Declarations rooted in faith also cultivate courage and boldness. When we speak confidently about God's involvement in our lives, we are emboldened to take steps of action that reflect trust in his direction. We're willing to move forward, make decisions, and embrace opportunities, even when the path is unclear, trusting that he will guide, protect, and provide every necessary resource for success. Furthermore, these declarations reinforce our spiritual identity. They remind us that we are children of God, recipients of his promises, and empowered to operate in alignment with his will. By declaring his guidance, protection, and provision, we affirm our position in his plan, our authority through faith, and our capacity to influence our circumstances while remaining rooted in divine wisdom. Faith-filled declarations also encourage a proactive approach to prayer. and spiritual engagement. Instead of approaching prayer passively or reactively, we take initiative in articulating our trust in God, expressing our needs and desires, and setting expectations for His guidance and provision. This proactive stance fosters discipline, attentiveness, and a greater sense of partnership with the divine. Additionally, these declarations strengthen spiritual resilience and mental clarity. By focusing on God's guidance, protection, and provision, we create a mental framework that prioritizes faith over fear, clarity over confusion, and trust over anxiety. This framework allows us to approach challenges strategically, respond to obstacles with discernment, and navigate uncertainty with confidence and peace. Faithful declarations also impact the environment around us. The energy released through words of authority, trust, and expectation influences the atmosphere in our homes, workplaces, and communities. Our declarations establish a tone of faith, calm, and alignment that encourages cooperation, inspires hope, and creates conditions in which divine principles can manifest tangibly. The practice of making faith-filled declarations requires attentiveness to language, intention, and alignment with God's principles. Every word carries energy, and every declaration acts as a spiritual instrument that can shift perspectives, open doors, and attract divine favor. By choosing words that reflect trust, authority, and alignment with God's will, we maximize the impact of our declarations and strengthen our spiritual influence. Furthermore, faithful declarations cultivate a mindset of expectation and readiness. When we consistently speak words of trust and alignment, we develop anticipation for God's intervention, clarity for His direction, and awareness of opportunities that reflect His provision. This mindset allows us to recognize and act upon guidance promptly